Well, welcome back, class. All right, so we're continuing on the Lake Snowden cover project. The last video you showed how to make polygons so you can create your coverage zones. Now, this video I'm going to show you the basics of giving a brain behind your data. Okay, now some of the stuff that I created ahead of time, but you can create this data yourself, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. So this is kind of where we left off last time. We digitized these particular zones on the Lake Snowden cover map. Remember that the lake is actually a separate layer or feature class, and we're concentrating on the cover map, which is what I'm turning on and off here. All right, so what I'm going to show you now is how you can give your map intelligence, and that is creating the brain that's behind it. All right, let's say you guys are out in the field, and I'm going to open up Excel. And I've created a spreadsheet, just a simple Excel spreadsheet, and I called it Snowden Wildlife. And I've put some items into this database, into this spreadsheet. I've added a field called zone, maybe a column called tree species, one for ground cover, one for maybe birds that you saw, bird 1, bird 2, whatever you have. I'm not really familiar with what you guys are doing exactly in your project, but I'm just giving you some examples of creating a data table. All right, and then I got a column for mammal 1, mammal 2, whatever mammals that you'd find in that area. And you can add to this, columns, whatever you're required to for your class. All right, but I'm just giving you examples. All right, so let's say that I created, I went out into the field and I have maybe a paper map that I created with all the zones delineated or something like that, and I'm just doing quick field notes. All right, let's say I don't have my GIS data yet, my GIS layers created, but I go out in the field and I do some rough inventory that's in the area, and I create a spreadsheet in Excel, and I put all these columns for the data that I'm collecting out in the field. All right, but next you want to be able to somehow use this in GIS. All right, so this is, like I said, just a simple Excel spreadsheet that I created. I'm not a wildlife person, so I have no clue, so I could have put dinosaurs in here or whatever. But anyway, I'm going to minimize the Excel spreadsheet, and we're going to go back to our GIS layer. Okay, and me being a cartographer, I may not know anything about your data, and in this particular case I don't. I'm not a wildlife manager. All right, so I don't have any clue about the information about wildlife or biology that's in this area. The one thing that I do know about is the geography. Okay, I know how to create the geography, and I know how to give it a certain unique identifier. All right, so let's say we have the Snowden. Let's say this is the only study areas that we're doing. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 polygons. Okay, let's say we have 9 different study areas. But I want to take this GIS base layer of my study areas, and I want to start giving it some intelligence. Well, first of all, it needs some kind of unique identifier. Each one of these polygons needs some unique identifier that the field people will understand, and it's in their language. Okay, let's say that you guys call these zones. All right, So if I come over here to the cover map layer, this shapefile, and I right click and open the attribute table, from us creating this table, there is no unique identifier that the wildlife management people would understand. Okay, these numbers and this information is ArcMaps intelligence. Okay, these are the feature identification. That's the identification number of the polygon as we entered it into our database. 0, FID 0, is actually the first polygon that we created. Okay, this one right here. Okay, and then as we added the polygons, as we went around, ArcMap itself gave them a feature identification. All right, it's not wise in GIS to use the feature identification as a unique identifier for some field data. The reason is these can change as you do edits in your data layer. All right, whereas if they had a zone field and they had specific numbers that don't change, all right, that would be the unique identifier. All right, so we have this data table. I've opened up this attribute table of the cover map layer, and we need to add a field for the zone. Okay, so in this view right here with the table, you can add a field right from here. So you can click this click this button right here that looks like a table, which says table options. All right, we're going to hit the drop down menu, and you're going to see right here it says add field. So I click add field, and I get a dialog box, and I type in the name of my field. In this case, we're creating a zone field. The type of data that's going to go into that field is delineated from this drop-down menu. You have short integer, that's like numbers 1 through 1,000 or something like that, not too long. Long integers for unreal long numbers that nobody in their right mind would use as an unique identifier. Floating point, that means it's decimal data. It's like 10.7. Okay, but floating means that decimal place moves depending on the precision of the decimals. Okay, double precision data, which is almost kind of like floating but different. We'll explain that later on in the class. And then you can make it a text field, or you can make it a date field. All right, text and short integers are really the two best uses for making a unique identifier. However, short integer is actually the best. Numbers, you can find numbers in a massive database a lot faster than you can text strings. Okay, so I would recommend using short integers for like a unique identifier for like a zone or something. Okay, dates I would never use as a unique identifier, and floating point, decimal type of stuff is not really recommended. But we're going to use the short integer, so we're going to create a zone field with a short integer type, and then you can add precision here, but it's not really needed. So click OK, and you'll notice that field gets added to our data table. Okay, now you can't go in here right now and add zone numbers to these yet, because this table is it's not in edit mode. There is a way to add data to a table without going in edit mode, but we're not going to talk about that right this second. Okay, so anyway, we want to add the zone numbers of all these different areas of study to this data table. Okay. Now you'll notice in the Excel spreadsheet when I did my field work, I only made 7 polygons. I only made 7 zones. So a couple of the zones in the actual GIS data won't have information, but sometimes you don't. Maybe you didn't collect it on that particular day. All right, so minimize the spreadsheet again. All right, so here's the attribute table for the cover map. Okay. And we now have a unique identifier called zone, even though it's not populated yet. Now we want to populate that attribute table. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so it's so we can move it around and get a better picture of it. I'm going to resize this window so I can see all of these polygons. Now we're going to come up to Editor, and we're going to start editing. We're not editing the polygons. We're only going to edit the actual attribute table. So we're going to select cover map again. Click OK. Don't worry about the projection stuff. Now, notice that the cursor is that black arrow, which is the select feature. This select feature tool. That's what we want. Now, let's start down here in this bottom left-hand zone. Click that, and notice that in the attribute table, that row gets selected because that row, feature ID 0, belongs to that polygon. It was the first polygon we put in, so it always starts with 0. But let's say for in my Excel spreadsheet, I had 7 zones. Okay, so let's say we look at our map and we find, let's say the logical choice for that is we call that, we actually see that's maybe zone 5. All right, so if you double click in the actual cell for zone, you can double click it, highlights it blue, and you can call it zone 5 and then hit enter. So now we've populated the attribute table with zone, and this polygon is zone 5. Now we had some evergreen trees in this zone, and I believe, let me see, let me look at the spreadsheet here real quick. Yeah, zone 1. All right, so let's say we come over to this polygon right here, select it, and it highlights it in our attribute table. Let's say we found this to be zone 1. We made this zone 1. Okay. And then we have this one, we call it zone 3, and this big one we call zone 4. Click this one here, we call this one, oh, it's down here. We call this one zone, what do I have left? Zone 2. Let's make the one in the middle. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. Click once. All right, click that one. Let's call that zone 7, and see what other numbers I got. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need a zone 6, right? So let's select this one and make that zone 6. All right, so I clicked on the feature. It highlights it in the attribute table. I double click inside the cell of the zone and give it its unique identifier. So once you get those entered in, now we got a couple of them have zeros. All right, so but we only have 7 records in our Excel spreadsheet. However, we can give them actual zone numbers anyway, even though they're not in our spreadsheet. So let's find, I think it's this one and this one. Those are zeros. So we're going to call this one zone 8, and we'll make this one zone 9. All right, so we have 9 zones in our attribute table. All right. Now, once you get your zone populated, in this particular case, you're done editing. So you can come up to Edit and Save Edits, and then stop editing. All right, I'm going to close this out. All right, so Cover Map now has a unique identifier in its attribute table, and I'll prove it to you. So we'll right-click on Cover Map, open the attribute table, and our attribute table opens. There's zone, and all the zones have been populated with some kind of unique identifier, some number that you guys are using to number these things or name them. Okay. Now we have some brains behind our cover map, but we need to allow those brains to access the outside world. So you guys did your hard work, your field work, and you created that spreadsheet, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to incorporate that spreadsheet into your ArcMap session. All right, so what we do is we add data. You guys are familiar with that, right? Remember? Okay, so let's say we go to our workspace. In our case, it's my Snowden directory. And you notice I saved my spreadsheet. I saved that spreadsheet in that directory. If it wasn't in that directory, you just connect to the folder that has it. All right, so I have this Snowden Wildlife XLS spreadsheet in my Snowden directory. And I'm going to add that spreadsheet to our project. So I add, and then Excel spreadsheets, you know that you can have multiple sheets in a worksheet, right? Okay, I basically put all that wildlife stuff on sheet 1. Now, in Excel, if you've actually named that sheet something, that name will actually show up in this list. Okay, so let's say it's sheet 1. All right, so I hit sheet 1 and add. Now over here in my table of contents, it has changed a little bit. It has changed over to list by source, and it does that automatically when you add in a spreadsheet. Okay, or any data table. But down at the bottom, notice that now we have the Snowden Wildlife spreadsheet in our table of contents. All right, so far that's pretty cool. ArcMap can read Excel spreadsheets, but it doesn't read it as a spreadsheet. It is given it it's kind of like a semi-attribute table, except there's no geography to it, okay? But it's still a spreadsheet. If I go in and change the spreadsheet in Excel and do a save, and then I open up this project, those updates would actually be in here, okay? So we have our spreadsheet with our field data in it. We also have our cover map, and that now has a unique identifier as zone. All right. Now let's come down here and right-click on the sheet and open that. Look at this. It looks just like that spreadsheet, except it's not Excel, but it has the same data we have in our spreadsheet. Here, I'll show you. So here's our spreadsheet right there, and here's our data table. Well, I can't put them side by side because they're two different programs, but here's our spreadsheet right here. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to do one more thing. Sorry, I'm going to move this up, then we can actually see them both at the same time. All right, so here's our spreadsheet, zone 1 through 7. Here's our data table, zone 1 through 7. All my tree species, all my ground cover, all my birdies, all my mammal ones, okay? Same as in here. Notice this says null for mammal 2 because I don't have anything in mammal 2, all right? So it's the same file. It's the exact same file, all right? Now, what we want to do is relate this data that we did in the field with our geography, all right? So we're going to minimize that for a second. And we're going to come up to the cover map. And I am going to right click, and I'm going to come down here where it says joins and relates. And I'm going to say join, and I get a dialog box that says join lets you append additional data to a layer's attribute table. Interesting. And what are you going to do? Well, we're going to join this layer. We're going to join the attribute table from a table. All right, and we're going to choose a field in our layer, which is cover map, and our field is that unique identifier we created called zone. And you're going to choose a table to join to. Well, there's sheet 1. It actually puts it in there by default because it is an external data table. All right, so we're going to select sheet 1, which is already in our box. And notice it automatically goes to that spreadsheet and finds a field called zone. We didn't enter that in there. It went in and found one and saying, hey, this looks like it might be a match with this zone, right? We're going to keep all the records, and we are going to hit OK. Now, if I right click on the attribute table for cover map, notice what happens. Remember, before we only had feature ID, shape ID, and zone. But now we have zone, tree species, ground cover, birds, mammal 1 and mammal 2 that are over there, right there. There they are, right there. Okay, see how that works? It joined those two tables, even though that they're not physically in the same file. All right, we've done a relationship from the cover map based on zone with the spreadsheet based on zone, and it matches. Now you notice right here on zones on each one of them, zone 8 and zone 9 in our spreadsheet, they didn't have a match, so they show up as null. That means maybe you haven't collected that data yet. Okay, so that's how that works. Now, here's the cool part about using this relationship together. I'm going to close this attribute table. Now, when I double click to do symbology on our map, I have access to all that data that's in that spreadsheet. Let's say unique values. Oh, look at there. All those items show up. We can make a map based on tree species. Add those values. So we got null, and we got birch and buckeye and fir and maple and oak and rosebud and spruce. You can change these colors. You can do it just like you have before on any other stuff. Let's find something that looks interesting. Well, pastels, that's all right, but anyway, you can choose any color scheme that you want. All right, this is really bright colors, but let's go ahead and do it. Hit OK, and boom, all those study areas got colored by the tree species over here. Now notice null shows up. These two, well, these two greens kind of look like this in here. Let's say you're out in the field, you have a map, and you go, well, I need to make sure that I don't show my null stuff the same as everything else. So you can individually go into that and change null to be blank or something and hit OK. And then when you look at your map, now you can tell that, all right, these two zones I still have to go out in the field and collect data. All right, so you can create a map based on the species of trees. You can change to find out what, to do it by maybe the the ground cover. Okay, so null will make that transparent again. And let's say bare ground, that's more of a brown to me. All right, and grass is always green, right? All right, so let's make that green. And litter, When I call litter for ground cover, I don't mean like trash. I'm talking maybe it's bare ground with maybe pine needles and stuff like that. That's what I call litter. It's not litter as in people's trash, okay? But that could be a ground cover. All right, so we got litter. We'll make that. Let's give it some stuff. All right, let's make it look different. All right, and then rocks, we'll make those kind of gray, and then choose OK, and then our map changes accordingly based on what we did in terms of ground cover. Okay, so there's the importance between the last session. We created the geography by creating all these zones. And then we gave our geography some intelligence based on an Excel spreadsheet that you guys developed maybe for doing your field analysis or your field collection, okay? So that is what attribute tables do for your geography, all right? So I hope this helps in working on this Snowden cover map project, and we'll go from there. Hey, see you later.